So you ever seen those animated bar charts where it's showing over a period of time how something's changing? So you can see, in this case, how many constructors have won the Monaco Grand Prix. Well, I'm going to show you how to make exactly this in R. So with that in mind, let's head over to my Rsstudio. So if you want to follow along exactly how I'm going to do here, I've got the Rscript in there, I've got the dataset, I've got the hex codes, and I've also got all the images all saved up in the description below. So the first thing you want to do is install various different packages, and the main things behind these different packages are we're going to be using tidyverse, and ggplot really is the main thing that's going to be driving the actual creation of the graph, and then also the formatting of how we're going to have this laid out. Then to do the actual animation, you need to install gganimate, and then we also need to be able to pull through the logos of the F1 teams, and to do that you need to install package gganimate. And then we're going to install dplyr if you don't have that already in. That will be used for all the different piping and joining that we're going to be doing. Then to read the actual images, with it being PNG, we need to install library PNG, and then ggpubr, which is what we're going to be using to put the background image as well, which is also a PNG. So with all those, all you have to do is install them. I've already installed them, so what I'm going to do is just add them all. And then once we've done that, we can start to bring in the actual data set, which is just all the winners of the Monaco Grand Prix since 1950 all the way up to 2022. And all I've done is save the file in my documents folder. So in this case, it's a CSV, and all I'm going to do is just pick up what the name of it is. Because I have everything pointed to my documents folder, this is why I only have to put the name in. But if you have it saved anywhere else, you just need to put the actual folder route, or the route that you have in your drive, to be able to get to the actual file. But for convenience, I always use the documents folder, because that's always my main folder where I feed anything into R. So once you've added in that information, all we need to do is run by using library readr, and then that will create a data frame called df, and then this will pull through all the information. And as I mentioned, it's got all the winners from the Monaco Grand Prix. It's got the drivers in here as well, but the main things we're going to be looking at is the constructors. So we've got the constructor's name here, we've got the race date, which is what we need, and then also we got race position. But I'm also going to use race position because it's always the winners and it's just one. I'm using that as what's going to be my count, to count how many times teams have won at the Monaco Grand Prix. Now, if you have any other data, it could just be where sales of something, you might have some products and then it's the sales that happened over a period of time. That sales amount would be technically your race position. That would be what's going to be used to get a cumulative amount to be able to see it build over time and change the position of what was selling the most. But because this is already very useful, instead of race position 1, I just kept that column in, and then I'm just going to use that to actually do what I want to do. And because we're going to be using date as our main driver for the data, what we need to be able to do is actually set the date we're going to be using to a date. So at the moment it's a character, so we need to make it into a date. So all I'm doing is formatting to as date, df meaning it's the data frame, and then the $sign to then tell you the actual column that we're going to do, and then we're formatting it day, month, year, and then we're pointing it back onto the original column name, so it just formats it there instead of creating another column. So that's why, again, you've still got race date as the bit it's pointing to. So at the moment you can see character, when we run this, it then changes the date. The next thing we need to do is then sort the order, because at the moment this is not in the order that we want. I think this is going from latest to, yep, it's going from latest to the oldest, and we actually want it to go the other way because we want it to count coming down. So if we go back, we now need to sort it, and all I'm doing is just changing the sort order of the data frame by race date, and then we're setting it to go in ascending, so we can just run this like this. And then if we go back, we can now see 1950, which is the first one, is at the top instead of at the bottom. So now we have that set up. Now we want to be able to work out at what point did they win, and then did they win, then add another win on. So that means by the time it gets to a certain date, if someone won twice, then they will show up as 2 instead of just showing the race wins of 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. It will go, oh, they won then, so that's 1, and then they won again, so that's 2, and so on and so forth. So all we need to do is add a group by of the constructor name, and then we're going to add a column called wins, and all that's going to be doing is adding on a cumulative sum, like I said, where it's going to work out, oh, they won then, oh, they won again, so that's 2, alt there, free, so on and so forth. So if we run that now, we can come back and we now see this new one here. And if we look here, we can see how that's worked. So Alfa Romeo won first, and then Ferrari, and then Maserati won, and then they won again. And then that's why it become 2. And then Cooper won 1, and then they went 2, and then Lotus won 2, and then Cooper won again. So they've moved a bit there, and then they've become 3. So then that's how comes you're getting that. And this is what you need to be able to apply, to be able to get the bar chart to move constantly with the amounts. Because obviously if you just kept adding 1, everything would just go 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. You need it to be able to actually go up in the amounts of where it's cumulative. So now we have that. What we need to do is be able to then group all that data based on the fact that we just need to have race date, because that's what we're going to be using as our driving animation force. And then we need the constructor name, because that's going to be our main thing that's going to be moving within the bar chart. But then we need to summarize the number of wins as well, because that's going to be what is going to be driving the size of the bar chart, and depending on where they're positioned with the amount of wins. Now with this particular bar chart race, because for each year there's only one change, but if you had sales that happened over a date or a year, you have multiple ones that will happen. So really all this is doing with this is just shortening the table. It's not really doing anything, because I don't have where teams have won more than one in that same date. But if you're working with different data, this is where it'll be able to take all the data for the different products, and if they all sold on the same day, it will just add on those amounts and give you it. And this is what this particular one does, but you won't see any difference really to what's happened in the data frame to what we're doing here. But I'll run it so you can see it, but it is a very important step if you're working with a different type of data set. But I'm including it here because if I don't, and you try and do this with any other form of data, it won't work how you want it to. So that's why I wanted to include this step. So if we look here, we can see these are only going up by the 1s, and then if we look here, we can see 1 1 1 2 1 2 1 1 1 2 1 2. So you can see exactly the same. All it's done is just reduced it to the data that we need. Now if we come down to the next part, what this is going to do is basically pull the data and then create a table that will then map out the wins by the race dates. So then you can get all the constructors across the top, all the dates down the side, and then all the number of wins in the main frame of the table. So if I run this, you'll see what I mean. So now we can see all mapped out at the point we know first win, Alfa Romeo, and then you can see how when the next one wins, which is Ferrari, they come in there, and then Maserati, and Maserati won again. So it skips, and then it shows 2, and then it's 2 2 2 2 2 2 2 2 2 because they haven't won again. But then it moves to Cooper, and then they've won, then they've won, and then Lotus wins, and then they win again. But then Cooper wins, so it goes 2. So then it's always going to show when the next ones happen. And another good one here is like Lotus, you can see here, and then they won then. Oh, and then they didn't then, because that was BRM, and by the looks of it, Tyrrell, and then they won again, and then they didn't win again up until the point we got there. So that's how it's kind of mapped out. And the reason why this works really well is because next what we're going to do is unpivot, and then what it's going to do is for each year, it's going to stick all that information. So it's going to go, whoop, add all that to 1950. So it goes all the way from Alfa Romeo to Mercedes. And then the next one, it would do the same. And it would just be like the 1-1, and it go the NAs all across there. So we go back, and let me just explain how this bit works actually before I go into that. Is all I've done is point this table to its own table. And the only reason why I've done that, you can all do it within the same table. It's just I'm doing it so I can show you how it looks different for each step. And then all you're using is something called pivot_wider, and then names from, so whatever you want to be on the column name is what you put in there, which is constructors. Values from, which is what's going to be in the main part of the table, which is obviously all this here, which is the wins. And then you want to fill by race date, and then minus race date is because then it's making sure that it's putting the lowest first. So then that's how comes you have that set. And then I've just done a view so then you can actually see it. So that's how that works. But like I said, what we want to do now is unpivot so we can see a date with each date has a constructor and then their results. So how we do that is we take in the data set that we've just created on that variable there. So we got that data, the table, and then we just create a new one. I'm just going to call it df2, and that's the one I'm going to be using mainly from this point because I don't want to have 2 ready tables going on. And then all you do is just pipe in, and then you do gather. and then you gather it by giving it the key, which is going to be what you're going to add on. So we know we want the key to be the columns, so that's going to bring down the constructor's names, and then the values are going to point onto the back of it, and then what's it going to be by, and that's the race date. The minus, again, play around with this because it might come out differently depending on what you're looking at, but the minus reason is because that's again how it sorts stuff, and we'll come across little things like that again where you can change sort order, especially with like rank, by using a minus. I don't use it in this instance because I use a different scale part in the ggplot, but I can show you how that works as well. But then that's all that's doing, and then we just want to reorder by race date, and then again we are running in the order of oldest to latest. Now if I run this, you'll see what I mean. So where all that information for 1950 goes all the way up to Mercedes there, and as we can see it's NA's all the way up there, but then Alfa Romeo is not, and then 1955 we've only got the 2, and then it stops when it gets to Mercedes, and then it goes on to the next one. So if we go here, you can see 1, and then all NA's all the way up to Mercedes, and then it goes into 2 where Ferrari and Alfa Romeo shown as 1, and then all NA's. All it's done is moved all that information over to how we want it, and this will just continue and continue and continue. So now we have that. What we need to be able to do is, if you have a lot of data, in this case there are 17 constructors, but what you can do if you needed to limit, say like top 10 or something, this gives you a ranking. Now the ranking's important because the ranking in its first place needs to exist so it knows whenever more wins happen, those will then show to actually move within the bar chart. So if I just run this so I can just show you exactly what it looks like, it's giving a rank knowing Alfa Romeo's top, and then it all goes down there and it goes down there, and then if we come down we can see Alfa Romeo, Ferrari and Maserati, they both have 1 win. So 1, 2, 3, Maserati have come in, they've won in 56, and then they won the next year, so then they will change from 3 and 1 to actually have 2 wins and then move to number 1. So if we come down here you can see now they've won in 57, they now got 2 wins, and now they've moved to rank 1. So that's how you get the movement in the chart. And the good thing is, if you have loads of data, so you might have like, I don't know, 50 different categories happening, you might not want your chart to be that big. You might want to just reduce it to the top 10. So then all it would do is just keep looking at the 10 and just show you that data. And so this is what this does here. So this groups by race date. This then arranges it in the order of total wins, top, and then race date. So it's always looking at where that sits. And then it's giving the ranks. Obviously more wins will give them higher rank, and that's what the mutate is. So you're creating a rank column that's actually calculating based on, here's your date, here's the actual constructor, but this is the wins, and the wins the most always at the top, and then it's giving you the actual rank there, and then it's ordering it in that way. And then you can filter by how many you want. So I've got 17, I'm keeping it at 17 because I want to show all, but like I said, if you want to just show top 10, all you have to do is just put in 10 and then you run it, but I'm going to put 17, so let's do this, run, and then like I said, this is what you get with the rank. So now you have all that set up. Now you just want to do some formatting parts to be able to bring in little extra things like images, and also set the colors. Now you don't want it to default to normal colors. You might, but sometimes they are not the colors that you want to determine on what you want. So say if you were like, in my case, I'm doing F1 teams, so I've got the hex codes that work with the F1 teams. I've also got their logos, which I've had to download, find, and then save into a folder. And the folder is just simply, in my documents folder, I have this folder called car_images. And then that's where I've saved all the images. So I've got all the logos for the cars, and I also got my background image, which is here. Now, when you download the zip file, all you have to do is just save those in the folder. So if you save these in your documents folder and then give it the same name, this will work perfectly. But again, if you save it in a different one, just remember to put your root where you need to go to. So basically all this is doing is taking your data frame 2 or your df2 table and then just adding another column that gives you the root of car_images, which is the folder, and then the constructor name with .png at the end. And the reason is, if I run this, I will show you what I mean. We have constructor name Alfa Romeo car_images, and then it's got thing, and it says Alfa Romeo PNG, and the same with Ferrari, it's just Ferrari.png. And then if you go to the images, you can see is exactly the same format that you've got here. Ferrari.png. So always make sure it's exactly the same name you save the PNGs, otherwise it'll break. And that includes if you put lowercase, an extra space in there, anything like that. If it doesn't match, it will break, but it tells you which ones did not match when you actually run the chart. So all that's doing is basically creating a column which we can use later on to then point to. So it goes, this is where the image is, I'm going to stick that there. This is where the image is, stick that there. And that's how you get it. Then we just want to load in our background image. This is just going to be storing it. And then we want to take our hex colors table and we want to join it onto our table here. So then we can point to the hex color so we can control what colors our bar chart's going to be. And the way we do that is we just import our hex colors. And then once that's in, we can see it here, hex colors. And I haven't got them all in because not all of them are in Monaco and it takes such a long time to find all this information. So I kind of stopped when I got to the point of where I just did Monaco. And then all we're doing is joining that column, so the hex colors column, onto the df2 table by the constructor name. So as long as the constructor name matches the constructor name here, this will work. And then all you're doing is pointing to the df2 table and then doing a left join, and then df2 is going to be your left table, and then your right table is going to be your hex color, and then you're joining by constructor name equals and two equal signs constructor name, and then that will pull through the information you need. And then what you also need to do is format the hex color as a factor, and that's just something you have to do because when it formats as the fill, it won't work if you don't have it as a factor. So that's why I've got that set there. So if we run this now, we now have our hex color on the side of our table. So now we've got that done. What I want to also do is add a year that will move with the chart. We don't actually have year, so I'm going to take the year from the race date and then add that as an extra column. So all I'm doing is creating a new column called year, and I'm just formatting as date, the race date, and then I'm pulling the format as date and then only giving me the year at the end. So if I run this, we now have our year at the end of the table. So now we finally got to the point of where we can now start creating our chart. Now, all the bits we done was just to get the data in the format to be able to actually create our chart. Now this chart has a lot of different steps because I've built so many extra things in there, but because of how you have the data set up, you could just have a bar chart that's just running. You can just put in a few bits of information and it would actually give you a moving bar chart without all the additional stuff that I've included to make it more visually appealing or more fancy, especially with like the images and then the different colors and just the layout as well. Now for the setting up of your chart, all you have to do is simply just add in your ggplot, point to the table you want, and then what we're going to use is rank as our axis to be able to point. So you imagine when we were seeing it changing over time, when the rank changes, that's when it will change. And then what we can do later is replace what the actual rank is. So instead of saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way up to 17, you actually get the constructor name. And then we're going to have total wins. So at the moment, all this is doing is basically creating you a bar chart that has your constructors at the bottom and your number of wins at the top. Now, because this is set up so it will create charts for each part of data and we're not summing up, this will just create loads of PNG loads that will save overlapping each other. And then those are what are actually used to create the animation. So it's not like it's actually going, oh, we're going to like go through here and then create this animation through it. It's just loads of PNGs that are saved with additional data over the top. And because of that, you need to be careful on the order you do things. So what I do next is add in the background image. And also, just before I move on, when I mentioned earlier about the minuses, in here, if you wanted the rank to be the other way, because at the moment, this rank in this situation actually puts the highest amount at the top and then the lowest, but you want 1 to be the top. So you can switch that around by putting the minus in there, but I actually changed that with scale X reverse, which I've got here. So if I move on to the background image, like I said, in the order you do things, this is extremely important because even though I'm putting a background image in, the actual image sits well at the background until you start adding other things over the top of it. And then it becomes a bit broken if you leave it at the end, because if you're putting, say, images or labels or anything like that, those will happen before. And then you put the image on and the actual image ends up being over the top of it. So even though you are setting it as a background image, it doesn't actually sit in the background. So this is why it's important. If you're going to have a background image, stick it there, because then at least you know it's going to sit behind everything. So that's the only reason why I've done that. And then we've actually got what we're going to actually just set our bar chart. So we just have a standard bar chart that doesn't really have anything going on, no color, no nothing. So now all we're going to do is now create it as a geom bar with identity set as the stats, because then that will allow the actual build up, and we can also then set what we want to do for the fill. So we need that one to be able to actually create the actual bar chart anyway, but we also need it because we need to be able to put in the hex code, because without this and that setting, it will not work. I've tried it in many different ways. I've tried putting the fill in here, tried doing things like that, does not work. This is the only way I got it to work. If you look at one of my previous videos where I cover how to add images to charts, because you're just doing the one, this works fine when you're putting it in here or just here. You don't need to add this. For whatever reason, and I don't know why, but couldn't get it to work even using the normal way that I've done it in the past. And I was just like, what's going on? And then I managed to find out this was the answer. This fixed everything. And also setting the hex color to factor. I mean, that one I already knew anyway, but even then it didn't work. But this is what actually helped it work, and then you still need to set as factor. So all you're doing is adding in what your chart is. In this case, we're doing a bar chart, so the geom bar, and then we are putting in the aesthetics fill equals column name hex color. So then that will set each bar to the hex code you've got in there. And then, as I said, this part here is purely for this to happen. That's the only reason why this exists. There's no other reason for it to exist in this case anyway. So the next part is to add the moving year in the bottom right hand corner. And to do that, all I've done is use geom_text, and then I've set what the label is, which is the year column that we created earlier. And then the X and Y axis is going to be how many positions we're moving here. So the X axis is going to be the constructors. There's 17 of them. So say if you moved it to 10, then my advice would be to maybe make this 9. I'd just move it down 1, because even though when you have it exactly at the bottom, it kind of overlaps with a few things and just doesn't look as nice and tidy. So just moving it up 1, or maybe you can do 0.5, maybe that might work. I didn't actually try that, but it might actually work. So if I do 16.5, it might look better. But you just play around with that to actually figure out what actually looks right. And then the y-axis is the actual number of wins. And I've done the max. So I know it finishes at 15 with, I'm not going to give the name away, but it finishes with 15 as the top wins by one particular constructor. And those will mean that that stays in its place, because later on I'm going to explain that you've got a moving x-axis with the total wins. And that is the reason why I've kind of hard coded this here. You can do a thing with min and max to be able to get it to follow. I couldn't get it to work, but this I actually found did do the job. If I figure it all out, I'll create another video or maybe a short just to explain how to do that. But that's what this is. So this is basically just setting where the year is in the bottom corner and do it. And then you can just change the size and the color. I've done it as gray because I didn't want it to be too in your face. When it's gray, it's just not as prominent, so you can focus on the actual movement of the bar chart. Where it's dark color, I've got the constructor names and the data labels and the title. Otherwise it'd be too distracting if you have too much going on. And then we come to chord flip. Now chord flip is basically taking a normal bar chart like this and then we're sticking it sideways. So we know constructors who were at the bottom are now to the left. And that will then let it run. And then all this extra parts here are happening is for clip off and expand false is just to stop where, because now you've moved the contractors over, is it would automatically push to the side and then you get a cutoff. This just expands that a little bit more. You still have to play around the margins to get it to fit perfectly, but instead of it just like literally just going straight to there, it gives you that space where you can actually start seeing the names of the constructors. So that's the reason to add that in. And then, as I mentioned earlier, scale_x_reverse is just changing the order. So instead of it being 17 to 1, it's now 1 to 17 in the rank. And now we have that bit sorted. Now we want to be able to just change where it says 1 to 17 to actually give the constructor name. So then all you're doing here is just doing geom_text, and then we are just changing whatever we called it. In this case, it's going to be rank in this instance. What we had as our x-axis, if you ever ever want to remember what it is, just remember it's the one there, and then we got that in there. And then you're just setting it as 0 so it sits right on point. And then we're going to label it constructor name because that is the data that's going to replace it. So instead of it being 1 in the first one, it'd be Alfa Romeo. And then we are just slightly adjusting how it sits, and then we are giving it a bold color and making it size 8 so it just stands out a little bit more. So now we've got the main part sort of done. Now we're just going to format how the actual layout of the graph is, because at the moment your chart will be very much in the standard R format, and we want it to look nice and clean and simple so nothing distracts from the actual bars racing within the actual animation. First, all I've done is actually created the theme as minimal, and that will reduce quite a lot of the actual parts within the chart. And also there's certain things that will just make like grayer and that, but in a way, I do so much removing in the end, it's probably kind of pointless to even include this, but I like to just include it anyway, just because I like to keep things minimal. But then, like I say, all I've done then is then use theme after I've done theme minimal, and then put in panel.grid equals blank, element underscore blank, and that's just removing the grid. And then we're doing legend position equals none, which just removes the legend that will show up, because we don't want that there, because there's no point, because we've got the names. You might want the legend if you're doing a group of something and want to show the groups, and the groups are the colors, but in this case didn't need it. And then all the different lines, so when you get on a chart, you've got your y-axis and your x-axis, and you've got your line, and then you've got your titles, and then you've got those little lines that kind of show, oh, this could this and this, or this is number those are removed. So the little line bits that I was saying about, that's the ticks. The titles are obviously your title of the chart, and then any text, so you don't get to see the number of wins, and then also any additional text. And all it's doing is just leaving that there, so then we can just focus on that, because we got set the constructor names, those will still show, but it will remove like the number of wins and all that kind of stuff. So then we can just focus on just the numbers that show up as the bar chart moves. And then I've done plot.margin and then equals margin, and then I've just set it to 1, 6, so it's, I think it's top, right, bottom thing. I can't remember which way it does it. What I found was these two here, so the one's these top and bottom, and then one of these are left and right. Left and right is where you want to expand, and the reason being is depending on how much you make your graph big with the words for, like, say, your constructors, where you how big your logos are, and then because of that you need to offset your data labels that are going to be moving. That all expands over time, so you want to be able to just have enough room for everything to sit in, and that's where you can adjust the margin. You just need to play around with it depending on what you're doing, and then you can figure that out. And then even though I've got a background image, the image is just a part with a transparent background, so actually it will just be white. So all I've done is just made this sort of like light sort of creamy yellowy color as the fill, as the background here. And then you can add what the chart title is, some subtitle and some other bits using labs, but we do that at the point of when we're going to do the actual animation, and you'll see why, because there's a part where we animate the date moving as well within the title. So that's why it's important to do it there. But to save time and just kind of what you're going through, you can actually start formatting that already here. And the formatting is simple as plot.title elements, and then you can just play around with what you need to do, where you want to position it, the size of it, the color of it. Do you want it to be bold? Do you want it to be italic? This is where you can do. So basically down here, this is what you're formatting. So you've got your title, subtitle, caption. This is plot.title, so that's your title, plot.subtitle, it's your subtitle, and plot.caption is there. Then all you're doing is just formatting it how you want and how you want it to have laid out. And it's just good to just do it all within there, because it's all part of the theme. So as long as you just do it in the themes, it's all there already, and then you can just adjust it as you go along. And then we come to our last two parts, which is adding the images and then also adding the data labels at the end that will be moving. Now for the images, you will remember we created that column over here that gives you your image underscore file, which is where all the images are saved. All we're doing now is pointing to that image file, and we're using geom underscore image to do this, and then we're putting in under the AES image equals image underscore file. So it's looking at that column, so now it knows, okay, we're going to find whatever that name is, we're going to match that up with the logo, and then we're just going to stick it onto the bar chart. And then you can adjust the size and I think it's the aspect ratio, because I mean, I did find that it adjusted how much it squished or how much you think. You have to really play around with it just to find out what works with the size size you're doing. I'm doing it for the 17 different ones here. If I changed it to top 10, then I would adjust these because actually size would be too small. I need to make that a bit bigger. In the aspect ratio, I just need to be able to just play around a bit, be able to get it to sit perfectly how I want. And then also you need to take into account when you play around with the size of these, this will also affect what you do here, which is for the data label, which is going to be changing afterwards. Now, because of I've kept the position of the images to be half over the bar, half not over the bar, and the text, if you add in the text for the data label, that sits just after the bar. So actually the logo and that kind of overlap. So you want to be able to offset what it is. That's why I've done -4.5 here for the data label using geom_text again. That will just allow you just to move it out. Now, weirdly, once it passes like each 10 parts, so once it goes to 10 or 20, it always keeps pushing out more. Oh, actually, no, it doesn't move out by 20. I think it's 100 is when then it moves out. So each like step where it includes additional number, it pushes out a little bit more. And so that's why when you see it move, it will go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then it'll be 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It will just jump a little bit. It's just down to how you've done the adjustment because it just pushes out. But like I say, you have to just play around with it a bit, check your margins, all those kind of things, and that will let it set. And then the only other thing I need to point out here is when you do the animation, especially if you're doing ones that are like small amounts of like ones all the time. So this 1 win, 2 wins, 3 wins, 4 wins, so on and so forth. Sometimes it gives you decimal places when you're doing your frame rates. So when you're saving a frame, it might go, oh yeah, 1, and then, oh, it's moving. So it goes 1.5 or 1, loads of different numbers. And that shows up. So what you can do is just put in for your label, before you put total wins as your label, just put in sprintf. And then this formula here, this is the one that I've got to work to remove the decimal places, even when it's working by creating its own frame PNGs for the animations. So just keep rolling through them and not actually giving you that. So if you're finding when you're creating it and you're getting these decimal places, this is the solution. This is the thing that works. So now once you've got all that, and I know it's a lot of information, like I say, I've made a really, I wouldn't say complicated, but I've gone full out. Instead of just doing a simple, here's an animation, it's moving like this, I've gone full for like being able to show you how to do it, where you add logos and how you format it and all this kind of stuff. So all you need to do now is just run that chart. And so come all the way up here. And even though I've run this and it's created the chart, or it will do eventually, is your plots will come up and your plots will look really weird. It takes a while because it depends on how much data you have as well. Because there's so much information that it's doing, it's saving multiple different images. So as you can see here, the chart's popped up, but we still don't see the plot. But how the plot would look would just be this mishmash of loads of data all overlapped, and it just doesn't look pretty whatsoever. But that's okay, because now we're going to move to what is the animation part. And this doesn't need to, as long as this is here, this doesn't matter. So we can go to our viewer and then we can move to the animation. Now, when I do this and run this, it won't look that great because I've done a lot of alterations to be able to make it so we can adjust the size later on. But if you were just creating a simple chart that just run and it just is all within the size that we do here, it will be absolutely fine. So if I just run this now, and then I can go through each one, but I can explain what I mean. Once it runs, it will show you this chart that's got the animation happening on it, but all the other things are big around it. But it's because when you create the chart and then you want to make it bigger, which is what we'll cover here, where you can change the duration, the frames per second, and also the width and the height. Things are the size, and then you expand, but those don't change, but other things change. So the good thing to do is when you play around and figure out what you want is to just run this, because this is only taking like about a minute to run. And there's times when you do the chart and it just doesn't work, or it doesn't do what you wanted it to do, and you're like, oh, I have to go back. And if you had to render every time to the size what you wanted, which takes about half an hour in this case when we get to that point, you'll never get the fixes done. So this is why it's important just to have this, even though this will look horrendous. Well, it won't look horrendous, but you can see what's happening. But you'll be like, oh my god, everything's all like big all over the place, stuff's cut off, doesn't look very nice. It's just because I know I'm going to make it bigger afterwards. But if you did make something that fitted perfectly in what's going to show up here, then you can just export that as it is. But once this pops up, I'm going to explain exactly what each step does. So as you can see here, this is the chart, and and it's all cut off, and you can see the movements and you can see the year, you've got all these bits, but it's all weirdly sized. But like I say, it's because these are all set, but if you make it bigger, that background will get bigger. These bar charts will get bigger. Nothing else will. That will stay the same size. And that would actually expand with the graph being made bigger. So what's basically happening here is you got your transition states. So we are moving by each year. So remember, we're using race date as our main one. So all I've done is just take the chart, because that's what I saved the chart as, and I've pointed it to a new variable called animation, and I've done a plus. All I'm doing is just adding new steps to the chart. And the reason why I split this out is because I like to save the chart and then play around with the animation to get to what I want it to be, then run it all together at one thing, because otherwise you'll be running it over and over. So what the transition states do is you're just doing transition length equals 2 and state length equals 0. This is just setting the points of what it's going to move by. I just have this set by the date, as I say here, race date, and that's what's moving there, but you've got year moving there, but race date is actually what it's looking at. So whatever you want the periods to move by or an order to move by, that's what you put in there. That's what causes your animation. Then what I've done is, you can't really see it here because it's not moving in the order of. Basically what happens is with view underscore follow fixed underscore x equals true, if you don't want the bottom to move, you just want it to be there and then you just see things just grow and it just grows within the bar chart. But if you wanted it to be that, oh, one pops up and then it just grows as things happen, this allows that additional growth when your data is moving along. And then under here we have an ease aesthetic, and then what that's doing is just doing quadratic in and out. This is what you see here. You see where it goes, oh, like does this little overlapping thing. There's a few other ones, but this is the one that I found that work. Now you will find when you do this, there will be cases where it does not work and you're like, why doesn't it work? I've got it all set up, does not work. But no. It's most likely because you've got a lot of data and you need to slow your frames down, because you need it to move in an order that is slow enough for it to move. Otherwise, you've got stuff that's moving really quickly. It's just going to be like that. It's never going to do this nice transition move. So that's why you need to just be aware when you do this, especially when it comes out in this state, you'll be like, oh, it's not doing what I wanted to do. So that's annoying. But this is the thing that works. And then, like I said earlier, where we set out actual titles where we formatted, we now can put in our title, which is what I've got here, which is there, and then our subtitle, and then the subtitle's got the additional movement, and this is because whatever this is, so this is race date, whatever you set as your transition state, if you put in this, it will animate that information in there as well. And then I've just done a caption where I've just put my YouTube name at the bottom just to give it like a watermark, and that's all it is. Like I say, run that and it's absolutely fine. Now if you wanted to just export this as a GIF, and you can do this by using GIFski, and then all you need to do is just install the package GIFski and then do anim_save and then save it what you want to save it as. And then once you run that, you will then get this chart as an animated GIF, just like that. So you can see you now have your animated GIF exactly in that format. But I want to be able to do this as an MP4, so I can make a video out of it like I did with this short. And to do that, you need to install a package called AV, and that lets you render. Now the problem is, if you wanted to make this into a GIF after this, it won't work. Don't know why, but it just doesn't work. So if you wanted to just make this bigger, you can avoid the render part, do that, and then you can save as GIF and it'll work. Because I want to be able to actually export to an MP4, I need to create a render first. So all I've done is use animate and then put animation in, which is whatever you've saved as your animation part here. And then all I've done is point to how many frames per second I want, which is 24, duration 55 seconds, the width 1080, and then height 1920, and then I'll run this, and it will take ages. It will take about 30 minutes. But if I just run this now, it will now render the actual bar chart. It'll be a lot bigger, but it will make more sense when you see it, and it will look exactly like what you saw at the start of the video, or if you've seen my short, it'll be exactly in that format. So at the moment it's saying it's estimated at 21 minutes. Once it's done that, it then does additional rendering where it does it by percentage. So we're probably looking at about half an hour. So because of that, I'm going to speed up so you can actually just see the final outcome. So now we have this finally rendered half an hour later. editor. It's run through, already got to the point, but because we've rendered this down as an actual video, we can just click play and then we can watch it in all its glory moving. And as I said, you've got your race date that's moving within there. Down here, you've got your years moving. You've got where the different constructors are moving around. And I think this is about the edge of the chart. Let's have a look, smooth this over slightly so you can see how everything was all squished before. So if I open up that GIF again, we can see that the title is all there. But you look at the sizing, it's the same. So the actual data bar is the same. The size of race date is the same. This title is the same. The constructor's name size is the same. And then if I scroll down, we can see that is the same size. And down here, you can see this little bit. That is the same size too. The only thing that's changed is, let's go back, is where this with the logos and everything have got larger and actually expanded everything. So that's why I've done it in this particular way, and that's why the GIF doesn't look very pretty, but you can see what happens when you make it bigger. And the important thing is when you're playing around with it, you just need to just figure out what works, what doesn't. And the good thing is, because this rendering to this size took so long, but it only takes a minute to do the other one. So you can just keep playing around, checking it, going back and forth to figure out until you got it working how you want. And then you can just render it, go off and go and make a coffee or have a tea or do what I just did some washing up just to pass the time while I waited for that to render. But that's it. That's all you have to do to get it to run like that. And then if you want to save it as an MP4, all you have to do is, instead of using the anim_save and then putting it as a GIF, all you have to do is just save it instead as an MP4. And then if you just run that, it will then save it. And because you've rendered everything, you don't have to wait for this to all render again. You can just open it up. And there you go, there's your chart that you can just import into, if you want to do it as a short, do it on TikTok, anything like that. It's all ready to go like this. But what I did for my short was that I just did the additional parts of adding it to DaVinci Resolve, adding the music and adding a few little tweaks, bit of editing, and that's it. It was ready to go. All done through R. You can get this chart. It took me a long time to be able to get this to look exactly like this, but now I'm showing you how to do it so you don't have to go through all the pain I did just to actually get what looks fairly straightforward as a bar chart. And if you did enjoy this video and found it extremely useful, then please give a like and subscribe, because that really helps promote my channel and also my videos, and gets out to more people as well. And if you want to be able to know how to do this but in a static graph where you can have your images and everything like that, I covered this in this video over here on how to add images to bar charts, or you can check out some more of my R videos over here. So with that in mind, until next time.